York is America's wealthiest city, yet 2.7 million New Yorkers live in poverty. Why is that?
This is turning into a red light district in Bangkok.
Stubbornly high food prices are still squeezing some families this holiday season.
Some have used the food pantry for years, others are visiting for the first time.
The first time ever, the total credit card debt across the U.S. has topped $1 trillion.
We've been spending a lot. We still have persistent inflation. It may be slowing, but prices are still high.
No, I was going to just say, like, fruits and vegetables just seem to be sky high these days.
New York City has 340,000 millionaires, which makes it not only the wealthiest city in America, but in the entire world. But since 2014, poverty rates in New York have been higher than the national average, with 2.7 million residents of the state living in poverty. And this is especially concerning for residents of New York City, where living expenses are much higher than they are in the rest of the state. And when you consider New York also ranks as one of America's least affordable cities, with $5,600 a month average apartment rents, it's no surprise that New Yorkers making $100,000 a year only have about $36,000 of spending power after they've paid their rent and bought their groceries. But it's not just rents that are crushing New Yorkers who live in New York City, or expensive groceries, or even the relatively high taxes. No, there's something else, and it's much, much worse. And once you know what it is, even if you don't live in New York, you're gonna want as little of it in your life as possible. Here we go, a bank. Banking is kind of a scam. Now, don't get me wrong, a checking account, a savings account, I like the idea that you can put money away for a rainy day and have it safe. That's good, that's responsible. But checking accounts, savings accounts, these are not the only products banks offer, and they're definitely not the most profitable products banks offer. For them, not for you. Which is why, although banks would love it if you had a checking account and a savings account with them, they would greatly prefer it if you would sign up for a totally different type of account with them. So you know how a checking account helps you save money now so you can spend it later? Same thing with a savings account. Well, banks have another type of account that helps you spend money now that you may or may not have later. And that's the one they want you to have. Did you know that New York has the 4th highest credit card debt out of all the states?
No.
And America has over $1 trillion in credit card debt right now. That's a new statistic.
Americans now carry more than $1 trillion in credit card debt going into the holiday shopping season.
According to Credit Karma, New Yorkers have an average balance of $7,600 on their cards at 21% average interest, which means that most New Yorkers have an upcoming minimum payment of $179. And having to make payments of almost $200 a month for stuff you already own, that's what's crushing people's finances. Because what might seem like a small amount of money actually builds up very quickly and can surprise people. And of course, that's a problem everywhere, but it's even more of a problem in New York, where the other costs associated with being here are also astronomical. So how did this happen? Why is there so much outstanding credit card debt, and why is it such a problem for New Yorkers compared to people living in other cities? So here we are in a Target, which is an everything store, a grocery store, a store with relatively low prices, but this is where, even in a tough economy, credit cards can be a real problem.
Wages start to flatline and people go, well, I should have a better standard of living. All of a sudden, I can't get it out of my wages or my income, so what do? Well, let's put a little bit of money on a credit card, or let's buy a better.
So people are increasingly turning to credit cards to help them pay for the things they want, but don't necessarily have the money to afford at the time they want it. And I don't mean that things like food aren't necessary, but to many people, not using a credit card might mean making financial decisions or spending decisions that significantly change their lifestyle. 12 ounces of soap, $5.30, or 13 ounces for $1.99. Do you get the $1.50 Q-tips or the $5 Q-tips? Also, even if you're in the habit of shopping smart when you buy anything, the prices on pretty much everything you find in a store like this are skyrocketing right now, and you might not even notice. And that includes food prices. As that happens, you may not even notice that you've gone from buying affordable groceries to unaffordable groceries.
You want a tip?
Yeah, let me get a credit card tip right here.
My credit card tip of the day: don't use what you don't have in your debit account. On your credit card, don't use anything if you don't already have it on your debit account.
Does it surprise you that America's got over $1 trillion in credit card debt right now?
No, it doesn't surprise me because people aren't informed on how to use it.
What do you think it is that is sticking people? Do you think it's a tough economy?
Lack of information, because it's always been a problem.
Now, for a lot of people, making spending choices that end up being unaffordable, it can happen quickly. If the price of food is higher this week than last week and you're in a rush and you buy everything for the week, you might not notice until you get home that, man, I just spent way too much on goat cheese. Goat cheese is expensive, man. And perhaps one of the reasons credit card debt is as high as it is because people just don't want to make certain quality trade-offs in order to keep things on budget. And according to this article, consumers have been using their credit cards to support and maintain their lifestyles even while inflation and living costs go up. So how has it come about that Americans and New Yorkers in particular are feeling more pressure than ever to use credit cards to prop up their lifestyle? Well, the answer is up there. It's over there. And although apartment rents have recently experienced their first decline, they had recently exploded to a peak of $5,600 a month for the average New York City apartment. That's $67,000 a year in rent. And even though apartment prices might be down slightly, most of the leasing activity that takes place happens in the spring and in the summer, and that's when the prices were higher. So most people are committed to paying amounts of money for rent that they haven't ever had to pay before. And on top of that, the price of cars is way up. So if your apartment costs more, and your car costs more, and your clothes and your food costs more, it makes sense that you're not going to have the same spending power that you used to have, and credit cards, unfortunately, are how some people are finding a way out of that temporarily. But one of the main things affecting credit card debt is something that all of us know about, but very few of us connect to being a massive part of this big problem. So this massive building behind me, this is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and the Federal Reserve controls the United States money supply and the interest rate, which is probably why they need bars on the windows and security out front. Recently, the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates, and not everyone is happy about that, especially people who now have 8% 40-year mortgages.
Credit card APRs are north of 20%. So remember, credit card APRs, the interest you pay on your credit card, that's variable. So as the Fed has been raising interest rates so aggressively, 14 times, you see these credit card APRs go up.
So basically, the Federal Reserve gets to decide what the interest rate is. And when they raise or lower the interest rate, all the other interest rates, like those on your credit card, those get adjusted too. And if you've got an unpaid balance on your credit card, that balance earns interest too. And if you don't pay that balance off, the interest that's earned on it gets added to it. Now the whole thing is bigger, and if you don't pay that off, the same process happens again. This is how these things snowball into massive debts that are completely unaffordable, and how the minimum payments go from being something that, oh, it's no big deal, to something that you're like, wow, the minimum payment's as high as the balance used to be. Which is why you should always pay your credit card off every single month and never carry a balance. Because think of it like this, what if every single person in New York stopped using their credit cards all at once? Even if everyone stopped using their cards, the balances would still go up because the interest gets added to the balance every single month. And because the Federal Reserve has been raising rates, credit card rates are now at around 21, 22%. That's crazy. And that's got a lot of people asking, if rents are up and food is up and clothing is up and credit card interest rates are also up, what can you do to get out of this financial disaster if you're in it? Well, the answer to that is right in here. So, the two things that people usually spend the most of their money on every single month are housing and transportation. And housing is usually 26% of someone's household budget, and transportation is usually around 13%. But in New York, 1 out of every 3 people spends 50% of their income on rent. Which means that if you're looking for areas of your finances to save some money, the apartment you're renting is a pretty good place to start. This is $3,000 a month, by the way, for a 1-bedroom, which for Manhattan's a pretty good price, but you could save even more money if you moved out of Manhattan and moved to Brooklyn or Queens. Plus, you might be able to get a larger place. And if you want to save even more money, live with a roommate, because this right here is a 2-bedroom apartment in the exact same building, and it's $4,200. So you could cut your rent in half by living with somebody else. And honestly, you'd have less privacy, yes, because there's a second person here, but the bedrooms are the same size and actually a lot brighter. And the second thing that costs people a lot of money is transportation. Now, most New Yorkers don't have a car. If you do have one, you should definitely sell it, because that car payment, that's a real hit every single month. And if you take the subway with unlimited cards, you're looking at around $1,584 a year. Or you could buy an e-bike like mine, which is $1,600, ride that for a year. But it's actually those random last minute ride shares. You're late for something, you decide to take an Uber that costs you 30, 40, 50 bucks. Do that once or twice a week, you're looking at hundreds more a month on top of your rent bill. So definitely rent, transportation, getting those costs down. That's going to help you get back a lot of the spending power that you've been losing every single month. I could wash both my hands in here. And if you do decide to move out of Manhattan and you get an apartment maybe in Brooklyn or Queens, but it's a lot further from the subway, one thing you could consider getting would be a city bike membership. It's $200 for the entire year, and you could use that bike to quickly get you to a subway line that you then take for the rest of your journey. That's a pretty good option, especially if you're deep in Brooklyn. But savings don't just stop with the apartment or what's in the apartment. No, there's actually other things that are eating our finances alive, and that would be those monthly expenses that are on your credit card and are recurring charges. Cell phone. This is a necessary expense which is on my credit card every single month. Same thing goes for the internet in your apartment. But do you really need a big TV right here with a subscription to Disney Plus? No, you don't. And apps like Spotify, you know what? The ads might be annoying, but you can listen to them for free. And honestly, loot boxes and online games, those are the worst offenders. There's not a whole lot of value in digital purchases unless you need it for work or it's your phone. But it's not just digital purchases that add up to nothing. In fact, certain things you and I have been brainwashed into thinking are good for us might actually be bad for us financially. So I know some of you are gonna think this is absolutely insane, but your gym membership, it might be good for you physically, but financially, that's another story. And you see those 2 treadmills up there? You can pay money every month to run on those. Or if you live in the little apartment we just saw, you can run for free at the park, which is directly across the street without the monthly fees. And in the morning, it's common to see New Yorkers jogging on the sidewalk in pretty much every neighborhood. Now, running at the park, it's not gonna make you as jacked as Mike O'Hearn, but you know what? He'd probably be the first person to tell you that bodybuilding is like the most expensive sport you could be into, between the food and the supplements and all the equipment you need access to. And places that offer classes, they are super expensive as well. And another way New Yorkers are wasting a lot of money on their credit cards is with impulse eating. Yes, that's right, that little cafe right over there, you're not coming out of there with less than $20 being spent. Pizza's expensive too now. Any kind of fancy slice, you're looking at almost $5. Pretty much all fast food spending is done on a credit card. What's a fake Mexican burrito at Chipotle go for these days? The point is that if you buy lunch and you buy a coffee somewhere, even if you're able to do that for $20 a day, which is gonna be a challenge, you're still looking at $560 a month, almost $7,000 a year, and you haven't even had dinner yet. And it's super hard to stick to a budget. If you're out with a credit card and you're not hungry for this today and you decide to go over there for some Red Bull and some pizza, it's gonna be very hard to stay disciplined with spending like that. And instead, it's significantly cheaper to just buy food at a grocery store. Yes, it's not as cool, it's not as convenient, but it's gonna save you so much money, and you'll be able to stick to a weekly budget. Much better than if every day you're eating something different that has a different price. But there's another way New Yorkers are burning through money on their credit cards, which might seem necessary at first, but actually is a massive trap. Now here we are at your typical overpriced New York City drugstore, and it's not the drugstore's fault they're overpriced, but it's your fault for shopping here because pretty much everything you find on the shelves is way too expensive. Look at that, $20 for Tide, $12 on Amazon. This is another example how planning ahead and buying stuff online and having it shipped to you will save you way more money than buying things like detergent at the very last minute in a store like this, probably on a credit card. Now yes, I'm aware that an Amazon membership requires a credit card, but the prices are so much lower. $26 for a leave. The way to cut down on your living expenses is to figure out how to live for less. And the reason that's especially true at your local drugstore is because they make 75% of their money from the pharmacy department. And that's also the reason most of the stuff that you'd probably want to buy in here is locked up. And if 75% of the store's revenue comes from not this, it doesn't matter if this is locked up, because the people who are gonna buy it, they're people who are waiting to use the pharmacy. They've got time to wait for someone to come by and unlock something for them. But the best way to save money and get rid of your credit card debt isn't just to avoid overpriced stores or overpriced gym memberships or even apartments. No, it's as simple and difficult as just paying down the credit card bill you have as quickly as possible. And that might seem counterintuitive, especially when your apartment rent is through the roof, but you've got to get rid of that debt so it doesn't explode. Because remember, those interest charges get added to the original balance, and that's why these things blow up. And sadly, most people don't even realize they're trapped until the minimum payments are unaffordable. And when that happens, it can be very difficult to pay down your actual balance. But the good news is New York City actually offers free financial services like counseling for people who are stuck in credit card debt. So the city's got you covered if you're having a problem like this. And they'll even help you if student loans are an issue. But what do you think the biggest problem facing New Yorkers is right now? Is it rent? Is it credit card debt? Is it something else? Let me know. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.